Hey, fellow note investor. Are you looking to learn the basics of note investing so you can get started? However, you don't want to spend a few hundreds or thousands of dollars and hours online on some training program? Have you thought about attending a notes conference? However, you don't want to spend the money or the time away from your family. Well, we have a tremendous beginners video series of 20 different topics, with each video being less than 15 minutes. This means each video is less fluff and direct to the content. Visit www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series to learn more. Again, www.jkpholdings.com/beginner-series. Puts here from JKP Holdings. Alongside me, Nathan Turner.
Hello.
What's up,
hello.
my man?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
We're looking forward to some really good weather up here in Northeast. I'm excited. Last week it was a wash. It was terrible. We talked about last week.
It's downright cold.
Yeah. And now we're going back to the 90s, which
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy we didn't have soccer last weekend because it would have been crazy. But we're getting back to the 90s. It's going to be a good weekend. Some barbecue and all that stuff. How are things with you?
Really good, really good. Just kind of going through everything. Took some time last week actually, just kind of take a minute and go back over my desk and kind of rearrange some things, and it's more organized. I'm liking this. This is good. But yeah, it's been really good. We've got some deals on the go, moratoriums scheduled to finish off the end of this month. We'll see. Yeah.
Yes. And I know a couple of states are extending them and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen when, right? But what we do know is the fact that what we can control is the fact that we can control borrowers. We can control what we do and how we make decisions and how we organize and what we buy. And for some people, buying can be the most difficult. For me, is managing the assets, right? But for a lot of new investors, they get nervous about buying. And I've talked to a bunch of beginners this week. And the most common question I get is either A, I don't know what to bid and how to process to do that. Or B, they accept my offer. Now what?
Yeah,
right?
What comes next?
Yeah, we talked last week about, do I send a formalized letter? And then what do I do with the servicer? I don't have one. And what can I do? And where can I go? And wait, what does a servicer do? Right?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in the note world kind of talking about all the due diligence and everything that goes into, choosing correctly and buying a good note, and which is all very necessary and information you have to have. But then the question is, then what? Yeah.
And that's a point where it's like, okay, you got there done. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go look for a note. No. You kind of just got to jump in and really start working with your team, right? And we talked about the team being the important part for us last week.
Yeah.
And we have attorneys. We have realtors.
Yeah.
And then we have servicers. Yeah.
Servicers are absolutely must have. It's not even just it would be nice if you had one. No. Must have.
Yeah.
That is an integral part of notes. And the servicer has to be in place.
And what I explain to people with servicing is it's like a property manager for rentals, right? They handle sending the bills. They handle all the issues, the questions. They go back to the landlord and say, hey, landlord, what do you want to do in a situation? If the renter stops paying, they're reaching out. They're doing the knocks and stuff like that. So, but the servicer can do a lot or they can do a little. Right. They can help manage your foreclosure. They can help manage everything.
Yeah.
So start or not, right? Yeah. So for a lot of the new investors and experienced investors, servicers can be their headache and also their lifesavers.
Yeah.
When you're managing multiple assets, you don't want to be doing this stuff on your own, even if you know how to, which we don't advise you to do, go contact borrowers, but managing the asset yourself can be overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
If you're managing 5 assets, you can handle it.
Yeah.
Sending that paperwork every year, sending the tax forms out, getting a phone call, knowing what you can say or not say,
Yeah.
how to stay out of jail.
Right. Especially at the very beginning. You know, for most people, they've still got some kind of full-time job, and this is
Yeah.
a hustle, which is great. But you have to understand this is not just to set it and forget it. There's management involved. Even with a servicer, there's management involved. You have to be on top of it in some way, shape, or form. There's work involved after the fact.
So what we've had a few servicers on before, but we've heard a lot of great things about Allied Servicing. So what we did was we're going to reach out to Melissa, right? Melissa Bolling is someone that you can turn to for advice. You could turn to for, helping guide you through the process.
Yeah.
Let's remind everyone she's not an attorney. She's not going to play attorney, right? And she'll tell you based on her experience, and that's all she can do. So today's focus is on learning about what a servicer can do for you as an investor. What are some tricks and what's going on in the world of servicing that investors should be worried about, licenses and things like that, foreclosure time frame and costs, and be prepared.
Yeah.
So, well, Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes. Can you give us a little bit about your background, how you got in the space, what brought you in, and how long you've been doing it?
I accidentally, I answered a blind box ad in the 90s and ended up working for Metropolitan Mortgage and Securities.
Okay.
And at the time, they were the largest institutional buyer of private paper.
Wow.
And I came in through their IT department. They were developing a system called BrokerNet that they were putting out there to really speed the process between the brokers to the contract buyers to closing. It was a really remarkable system for the time. I really enjoyed working on it. I provided a lot of support. But then I ended up transitioning into supporting their servicing system. And so I was working on the backside of that constantly. Well, then I kind of fell into the servicing manager job. So I did all their non-default servicing managements. So we did documents, we did all the loan adjustments. It was customer service, it was escrows, things like that. And I did that for years. And at its height, I probably had 51 employees. And of course, I worked closely with Sheila White, who was their acquisitions manager. So she managed all their different closing departments, whether it was the note space or it was the origination space or the structured settlements and annuities, lotteries, all of the things that they bought.
Right.
And so we worked together forever. Well, when the parent companies had their difficulties and their broker dealer had their difficulties, and they ended up having to file bankruptcy. And the insurance companies pulled out. I worked for one of the insurance companies briefly, same role. But they basically said, Metro and Summit said to us, they said, Melissa and Sheila, we want you to find a servicer for this little tiny portfolio we have left. And of course, it was a super, super special portfolio because they'd sold most of the servicing to Aquin by that time. They didn't really have anything that was normal remaining in the portfolio. They had sold a bunch of loans. Later on, they would have been selling a bunch of loans to Security National, who bought several. But what really was the sticker was like the partials and the special assets. And so we're looking and we're talking to different servicers and we can't find one. So originally it was a joke. We're like, we should go do this ourselves. And then one day we're like, no, we should go do this ourselves.
Wow.
And so in 2004, we left our cushy corporate jobs and decided to do this. And so we opened our doors and it actually worked out great. Metropolitan and Summit were one of our first clients. Security National turned out to be one of our clients because they wanted us to service the partials for them. And then it just grew from there. And as everyone knows, this industry is so word of mouth.
Yes.
It really is. And we have done so little advertising. We do a couple shows a year. back when the world was still turning. We would do a couple shows a year. And that's all we've needed to do because this industry is so close knit. Everybody knows everybody. Of course, we got a huge influx of business when Note School took off. Eddie, of course, has been a friend of ours for years because he was a Metro client. And that's the funny part is when people call up and they're like, I knew you from Metropolitan. And I'm like, okay, does that mean you're coming with the torches and pitchforks? Because that's what happens here. But, but they know that you know. They know that you've seen it.
Yes.
So when partials got big, we were like, all right, we're already servicing them. Great. And it was, whenever they come up with the new shiny product, wraps, we were like, great, we can do wraps. Wraps are no problem. We've seen them before. So I think that experience with Metropolitan really gave us an edge in this industry in that I don't have clients who come to me and say, I want to do this. And I go, I've never heard of that because I've seen so much already because Metro did so many different and unusual structures. I mean, literally we had 8 different kinds of partial at Metropolitan.
Wow.
I can't believe I'm saying that out loud because now people are going to be like, well, what kind of partials?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
How do I do those? But they were super flexible. They were the kings of buying the deal in a way that worked for both the buyer and the seller. The seller got what they needed, but the buyer mitigated their risk by the way they purchased it. So it was great to have that experience and to see it. Although I will admit, when I first came into this industry, I was like, I came from originations and I was like, you do not have enough paper in this file. There's not enough paper here. How are you buying this? And is this legal? Because it doesn't seem right. And
Wow.
So
but
you were
now,
working
I
all
mean,
those-
we've been doing this since 2004. And it's amazing to have made it through 2008 and even through the pandemic and, knowing that there's some challenges coming our way probably in the next 12 to 18 months. We're just really looking forward to continuing.
That's really interesting that you were doing partials and special stuff before the crash. That
In the
was
90s.
all the lead up.
Yeah.
In the 90s, we were doing them.
Very interesting.
Wow. See, we learned something, Nathan. This is great.
Well, we all like to think that we've figured out partials.
Yeah. And then you met. Yeah, then you meet her. So it's cool to hear about the background because Nathan and I, even though for most people we're 10 plus years in the space, you have people doing this for decades that just trump our knowledge and being around you guys. And I talked to an investor who's been doing this for a long time too. And like, well, my techniques don't work anymore. Actually, your techniques are kind of what we all need because everyone's doing it a new way. And you're really losing out on the fact of reading collateral files and understand the borrower instead of just taking a tape and then going institutionalized and just doing it. Partials one way. There's only one way to do a partial. We mean 8, right? And not being creative with things. And that's what I think that this space is missing moving forward. And I think that's what's going to happen because institutional notes are at 3, 4, 5%. You can't buy them and get a 10 yield on it anymore. Where 8s and 7s and 6s could lift up. So creativity is going to be a big thing, and partials maybe is something me and Nathan talked about bringing on a partial conversation, and I think we'll return to that sometime soon. So let's go back to basics here. I'm a brand new note investor, and a servicer is someone I've been told I have to use. What happens if I don't use one?
Yeah, why do I actually need a servicer?
Now, so my thing is this. If you don't use a servicer, it means you like talking to borrowers constantly about their questions. And these are unsophisticated borrowers so many times in this industry. And you just like talking to them. You like making sure they have insurance. You like making sure that you're sending information to the IRS and to them appropriately and that you're complying with all state laws as to what's in that year-end package. You like sending them bills. You like calculating payoff quotes yourself. And most of my clients have real jobs. I mean, you guys mentioned that. They have things that they do every day, and this is not it. And so the level of involvement that you want to have with the loan is determined by the systems that you put in place, and the servicers or the attorneys or the property preservation companies, whoever you're hiring to help you out and keep your portfolio performing or reperforming your non-performing portfolio. However, you've come into this space. You can do it all yourself. I don't do anything that's magic. You know, I happen to have a great system that does a lot of things for me, but if you're Excel savvy, you probably can do most of the math I do in Excel and be able to produce what you need to produce. And the question is it worth your time? Are you making money servicing loans, or are you making money acquiring them, working them out, turning them with partials or resales? Where is the best use of your time?
So let's explore it a little bit more, right? And I think that for most investors, they don't even know what you just said, right? What do you mean insurance? Why do we need insurance? Let's back up even farther than that.
Yeah.
I'm a lender. I just bought my first note, and I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to call the borrower up and say, hey, I got a note that I own that's yours. And the grandma picks the phone up, and then you say, you know, I can't reach him there. I'm going to call the job and see if I can get a hold of him there. Let me try him at 9 o'clock at night because he's probably picked the phone up then. Can I do any of those three things? And what if I say something on the phone that's wrong? Is there legal consequences of doing that kind of stuff?
Generally speaking, so everybody talks about Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That technically applies to third parties. Allied is a third party. I don't own the note, so I have to observe it. But I will tell you, if you as the holder are not very careful to represent the actual holder, you have to say, if you bought it in XYZ LLC, you have to say, hey, I'm Melissa with XYZ LLC.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a property, or you can't have a loan management company or a loan workout company. You're a third party. But even if you're calling as a representative of the holder, if you are not observing those rules, you are opening yourself up to legal. And because there are attorneys out there that pay their bills with violations of debt collection laws, because there's also state laws. And so if you don't know your state and federal laws just as great as, you know, you need to know all of them in all the states you're in, you can violate it. And maybe no one will notice. Maybe the borrower won't notice. But, you know, you can't like keep calling them. We've had this experience. A client will just call and call and call and call. That's harassment. Or the client will text them and just text them and text them.
That makes sense, right? Text is how you get a hold of them, but
that's harassment. They cannot not to respond. Then you're supposed to take proper legal action. You can't threaten them. You can't say, I'm going to, you know, you can't be like, if you don't send me money, I'm going to take your house. You know, it's true, but you have to do it right. We had a collector back before the days when I was at Metro. The guy was like, I'm having a garage sale this weekend. I'm trying to raise money to make my payments. And this collector said, well, you better keep your camping equipment because that's where you're going to be living if you don't make your payments. This is a perfect example of what you cannot do, especially these days. And you cannot afford, no one can afford a consumer protection lawsuit in any way, shape, or form. None of us can. Granted, servicers are a little bit more used to defending those and dealing with them. But again, you don't want to do that. And if you're new, it makes sense to have people in place that can save you from very expensive errors, because that's not the experience we want you to learn from. Those aren't the experiences we want you to learn from. So there's a lot of risk, and so you have to determine how much risk you're willing to take and how educated you feel that you are. It's not hard to become educated. I'm not gonna pretend that it is, but can you remember, you know, each state, some states have different breach notices, because I have people who are always like, I'm just going to send the demand notice myself. I have one that my attorney did for this state. And I'm like, okay, you're in a different state and it might have a different timeline. Are you reviewing your documents? Do you know where to look to find out the breach timeline? Do you know where to look to determine if you even need a breach notice or whether you can go straight to foreclosure? If you don't know these things, that's why you need a servicer in place who can take those steps for you.
So let's go up. We're going to definitely get some more topics here. And I think that, you know, we also have people who want to contact the borrower themselves. When can we actually start doing that?
I'm sorry, I missed that. I had some feedback.
Dave's working something out there.
It's like, is it me? It's me, isn't it?
Got something else going. So let's talk about or Dave's back. You good?
Yep,
Dave?
my apologies.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not sure what it was. It was a comedy act. I apologize. So when we're talking to a beginner, one of the questions they often have is that, you know, this hello letter, goodbye letter topic, right? When can I call a borrower? I just bought the note from Nathan. I said, wire him the money. I'm going to call a borrower and get him on. And I'm going to start the process of getting him performing.
I feel that is a poor choice. And here's why. Here's why. So there are two actual letters involved in a note sale. There is a letter that, in this example, Nathan would send to the borrower saying, I've sold this note, and this is who I've sold it to, and this is their contact information. And that is commonly referred to as the TILA 404 letter, which is strictly a notice of loan sale. It says, I held your note, I've sold it to this person effective this date, and it gets mailed. Then there is the goodbye letter, which is the outgoing servicer says, hey, servicing is changing from XYZ to Allied. And there's two different notifications that have to happen. In my experience, most borrowers don't open either of those. So FYI, they throw them away. Then what happens is, so the servicer goodbye letter sets a date that Allied takes over. After that date, I have 15 days to get the loan into my system, check all the documents, make sure everything's correct, do our QA, and then I send a hello letter that says, hi, I'm Allied, I'm your new servicer, this is how you reach us, these are your options for making payments, please send us proof of insurance, and here's our privacy policy. So it goes out to them, and it includes their coupon book. And the idea is that now they know who we are and they can pay us. That's great. Now, the service transfer date starts a 60-day window where the borrower cannot be collected upon, nor can we impose late charges. It used to be known as the RESPA service transfer period, but it's a 60-day period in which I do not recommend anyone make any calls to their borrowers. It's designed to make sure that when the borrower sent a payment to the prior servicer, they have time to forward it to us and we get it credited. So there's no collection occurring for interim payments that have been lost in the, or not lost, but they are still going to the old servicer, still going to the new servicer. You know, let's get them all in line. Get the borrower getting their insurance to us. Get all of that working through. After that 60 days expires, if the borrower is not current, that's when the servicer is going to start their outreach. Did you get the goodbye letter? Did you get our letter? We will send copies. So again, right after that 60-day period, it's a very kind contact. We make the assumption they didn't read the letters because most Americans, unfortunately, don't read all their mail. They don't open it all. You know, and I think it's because I've been in this industry that I find that amazing. I open everything. Okay. You just never know. But they almost never receive it or receive it. They almost never open it. So if we get returned mail, we also, you know, during that 60-day period, we may have to do a skip trace. Maybe we were given a bad mailing address. Maybe we don't have any phone numbers. That happens commonly. So we're going to be doing some of that research as well. Our boarding process, of course, is not just loading the data into the system. We compare that data to the documents. If they don't match, now we're questioning, was there a mod? Is there a forbearance? Is there a letter somewhere where someone said we're going to do this thing for a while? Why are they different? If we check bankruptcy records on all borrowers, I cannot tell you how many deals I get that are not tagged bankruptcy and have a Chapter 7 discharge that applies. And once we've got discharges, now those phone calls the new lender wants to make are prohibited. You do not call borrowers with discharges. If you didn't check that in your due diligence, don't make a phone call until you have checked Pacer. Pacer is super cheap. I encourage people to have it. It's a double-edged sword because they don't understand what they're reading and they get a lot of questions as a result. But just being able to see if there is a discharge that is after the date of your loan origination is huge, because that's going to save you a lot, because no one wants to be pulled into a bankruptcy court for contempt of a discharge order. So, and these are all things your servicer does as a matter of course, but definitely do not jump on the borrower.
Let's just make sure we're clear on that. So a borrower goes in bankruptcy, they make all their payments, they clean right through it, and their loan is still active, right? They didn't get dismissed. They got through it all. Everything went through. The borrower is on the other side of it. They default afterwards. As a lender, I can now call that borrower, even though that loan, so the loan is still active after bankruptcy.
If it was a Chapter 13 discharge, and this is default on post-petition payments or post-discharge payments,
Correct.
yes, they are still obligated for those payments. Chapter 7, however, eliminates all personal liability. They can never be called ever again. Your only recourse is the property. So if they are not paying post Chapter 7 discharge, your only option is notice of demand and work through foreclosure, unless the borrower makes inbound contact and requests a modification. And then you want to make sure that your modification or forbearance contains special language indicating it is not an attempt. It's voluntary. You're saying it's voluntary. You're restating their bankruptcy information and saying this does not create new personal liability.
So just to be clear,
special language is required for any post-discharge.
Yeah, just to be clear though, if the borrower takes Chapter 7 and retains the debt and holds the asset, right, and they get through bankruptcy and they retain the debt you can reach out to them. It's when they discharge the debt out of the system completely and they're no longer responsible for the debt itself.
If they did not reaffirm in the Chapter 7,
Correct.
you cannot call them. They had to have reaffirmed the debt, which is so rare. Most debtor counsels do not recommend reaffirmation for their clients. We try, and when they put their intent to reaffirm in their Chapter 7 filing, we will send a reaffirmation agreement immediately for them to execute, but it almost never happens.
Yeah.
But it's just safer to Chapter 7 post-discharge. Do not make a phone call. Start your legal action and let them contact you.
So going with that is that the servicer can't make any contact or recommended contact for 60 days. Can I go to my attorney and say, I want to file foreclosure immediately?
I wouldn't. Okay. Well, there's two answers to that question. If they are reasonably performing, let's say they are less than a year delinquent and they've made payments in the prior year, I would wait out the 60 days. Now, if you've got a true non-performing that's 6 years delinquent, they've never made a payment to the last 3 servicers, I'm okay if you want to have your attorney start action, or even our attorneys will start action during that 60 days because they are truly non-performing. There are no payments that are getting lost. There's none of that. They can't claim they didn't know where to pay, although they will. And we still can't assess any late charges during that 60-day period, but you can at least start that foreclosure action. You can get that 45-day notice out. Then you can do your breach, and then you can start the foreclosure. But again, same thing. There are statutory notices that have to occur before you can start foreclosure, and that's why you need to coordinate with your servicer. You can't just buy the note, go to your attorney, and start foreclosure. And you have to be careful. We've had attorneys who didn't understand the moratoriums. We've had attorneys who didn't know that there were statutory notices that had to go out before they could start. So, vet your attorneys as hard as you vet your servicer, because you want someone who knows everything, because today's environment is too complicated to simply have, your brother who, is a general purpose attorney send a breach notice for you. It's cheap, but it's not a good idea. And I don't understand. I would say Allied, we prepare breach notices here. They're $100. I don't think that's too expensive. There's a couple states that are more expensive, but most states it's $100. And to have it done right, but people are like, oh no, I'm gonna have my own attorney do it. I'm like, you must like paying bills because they're going to charge you 3 or 4 times that.
Yeah.
But we're pretty flexible at Allied. You want to use your attorney, use your attorney. You want to use our attorneys, use our attorneys. However they want to do it. Not all servicers are flexible like that. There are servicers that require you use only their approved attorneys and you coordinate through them. We have a blended philosophy. And if you use your own attorney, just keep us involved. If you send a demand,
Yep.
tell us so we restrict the account and don't accept payments. Be great. Tell us what your fees and costs are that you've incurred. You are going to have to send us the bills. You cannot recover things like the cost of recording your own assignment. You know, we need to look, we need to see what the bill says, so that we're accounting for it properly on the borrower's side.
So I got a question on going back again to this is a new note. It's being transferred over to Allied.
Mhm.
Let's say that I did a bunch of postcarding and I found myself just a regular seller finance note.
Mhm.
So it's not something that was previously professionally serviced. It
Mhm.
was just, you know, mom and pop service note. So what information do you need in order to board that loan?
Really, the information we need is no different. The absolute minimum, the only thing I can't know from a review of the documents is the unpaid principal balance and the next due date, any outstanding balances, and the borrower's information, social security number, contact information, etc. But the information is generally the same. I would never buy a note from an individual seller that did not either have a reasonable facsimile of a pay history that was itemized, principal, interest, running principal balance, especially accounting for escrow if that was involved, all of that. If they didn't keep anything formal, I would get a pay history affidavit. You want something in the file that you can stand on when the borrower says, that's not my balance.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes we just get a pile of canceled checks and an Excel sheet. Great, that works too. You know, we've got evidence, we can stand on that. But
Sure.
the difference is that I don't have a service transfer period. Basically, there is a letter from the outgoing seller that says to the borrower, it's addressed to the borrower, it says, I've sold my note to Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
And Nathan wants you to make your payments to whoever your designated servicer is. So it would say make your payments to Allied. They send that to the borrower. That's the party they know. The borrower hopefully will read it and do that. And then they just include a copy in our package. But there has to be something in our package that shows the borrower's been made aware that Allied's the new servicer.
Yeah.
We have deals where clients have serviced themselves for whatever reason. They've serviced themselves. Maybe they did it to take a non-performing and get it into a workout. And now that it's got a workout, they want to engage a servicer. We see this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We have a letter we use. We call it an election of servicer letter. It's basically, hey, I've decided to use a servicer and make all your future payments to Allied. Again, no 15-day notices, no 60-day transfer period. It's simply, I still own your note, but I'm going to use a servicer now. So there's a variety of notifications, but the key is just notifying that borrower that you've brought a servicer on.
All right.
So we have a question from Cody Cox. How often does a borrower respond with proof of insurance?
If they are not a land contract, surprisingly often. So our welcome package does say, send a copy of your insurance. Here's our lost payee clause. Do this. We actually use a vendor down in Dallas who then does the follow-up statutory notices. You have to send X number of notices so many days apart before you can actually place insurance and assess premiums. It's federal law. Luckily, we let them do that. They also review the insurance to make sure it's appropriate, that it lists us as lost payee, that it covers either replacement cost or the unpaid principal balance, whichever is less is the requirement, and that it meets our other standards. And then they will monitor that for us. Generally speaking, if you're talking about a note and deed of trust that has been professionally serviced in the past, chances are they're going to have insurance and they'll provide, even if they only send us a copy, or even if sometimes they just write their agent name and number on the form and they send it back to our office. Great, we'll contact them, we'll get it updated. That's awesome. If it's a land contract, most often the borrowers have been told or are laboring under the misunderstanding that they can't get homeowners insurance. The key to getting homeowners insurance when you have a land contract is not to call your agent and say, well, I don't own the property, but I need homeowners insurance. That's really the key here. The key here is to say, I bought this house, I need homeowners insurance. And it's a pretty easy, straightforward thing. what we do, what Allied does is, in addition to the outreach that our vendors doing to get insurance, is we do a lot of education on the phone too. The first time we talk to them, one of our procedures is to ensure, do you have your own homeowner's insurance? Have you updated the last payee and sent it to us? And if then they'll say something like, well, the seller had insurance. And we're like, okay, that will continue here and you're going to get notices, but it's really in your best interest to have your own insurance. We try to educate them because they don't understand that force-placed insurance or lender-placed insurance is only going to, in a best case scenario, pay off your loan. Nothing for equity, nothing for contents, nothing for loss of use. And in many cases, the deductible is quite high.
Yeah.
And so for smaller losses, there's almost no way, because they don't have $2,500 to start the work and they have to pay their deductible before any claim funds kick in.
Yeah.
The slight advantage is that if they're delinquent and it's a smaller claim, we can always apply those funds just to the loan, because we can't really get in there and get the work done. So it's a little more difficult to do that. But borrowers can be surprisingly responsive if they've been responsible borrowers in the past. Borrowers who didn't have insurance in the past, it's really hard to get them to get insurance. They don't like paying that first year. That's really the key, especially if they're escrowed. They don't like to pay. They don't like to pay that first year while they're paying escrow. They're like, you're double billing me. And we're like, no, savings account. Think of it as a savings account, because in a year, we're going to pay that whole premium and you'll be done. So we spend a lot of time on insurance education with the borrowers, because they really either haven't been asked to be responsible and have insurance, or they're under the impression that they can't be.
So we had a second question from Marco. What's your recommendation for setting a cutoff date when your performing loan sells or when a non-performing loan sells? I guess if I'm the seller and I'm selling my loan to Nathan, what's your recommendation for setting a cutoff date? I guess, Marco, correct me if I'm wrong, based on when the contract sale date. If I'm going to sell a loan today, when should my cutoff date be from your recommendation to ensure payments and whatnot?
So no loan sale is ever going to be perfect, because borrowers are unpredictable.
Yep.
If you have a borrower who is, maybe they're on ACH with Allied, their payment comes out on X date every month, then it's easy. Pick a cutoff date after that date. You get that, you're going to get the July payment and they're going to start with August. If they write a check, it becomes more difficult. That's why it's important that your new servicer sees the purchase and sale agreement, because service transfer will have nothing to do with cutoff.
Right.
Basically, funding is what starts the service transfer. You fund, the outgoing seller says, hey, Allied, we're transferring to FCI. And so then our clock is running on a whole different thing. What your cutoff date was doesn't matter. We're going to send every payment we get till service transfer to our client. And then after service transfer, we're going to forward to the new servicer, but they need to know, who that might belong to.
Right.
So cutoff is great, but it almost doesn't matter, because it has to do with when the borrower is going to pay. Obviously, with a delinquent or truly non-performing loan, it doesn't matter. The chances of money coming in are pretty low, and that's really the only point of cutoff, is determine who gets payments before this date, who gets payments after this date.
So those who are familiar with what we're talking about here, cutoff date is applying to the payment received from the borrower to who does it go to. So if the cutoff date's today and a payment comes in tomorrow, technically that money goes to Nathan. If the cutoff date is today and a payment comes in today, the money would go to me. If I set the date 2 weeks in advance, because I know the fact they pay on the 10th of the month, I set it up like that, I get that money, Nathan gets anything after that. So that's what cutoff date means when you're dealing with buying a loan. Cutoff date, when you're looking at a tape of assets, is different. That's usually the time frame of when the data was last updated. So
on a non-performing, most often it's whatever the funding day is.
yeah.
So if funding day is today, then that's the cutoff date as well.
Yeah.
For a performer, that, like you say, you can set it to whenever, whatever makes sense.
And one thing to remember is, so we kind of refer to them as interim payments. They're payments that came to the prior servicer before the service transfer date, but after the cutoff. What normally happens is the servicer is like, not our job. And they just send it to their client because normally they don't have any information for the new buyer.
Correct.
So if it was loans coming to Allied and Nathan, wasn't my client at the time, I don't know where to send the money. So there are interim payments that you sometimes see where they've gone to, in our example, the payment was sent by the servicer to Dave, and Dave's got to forward it to Nathan. That's kind of your job. Sometimes the servicer sends it to the new servicer. We can't post that payment. It's already incorporated into the history and balance in our system. So we just have to deposit and forward it to you. We don't necessarily have a breakdown. We don't necessarily know if there's any extra included. Believe me, that servicer took their fees out. So you're definitely not getting a whole payment. So interim is tough. There's a lot of confusion about the payments. Really, all you can do is between the history that we get from the outgoing servicer and where we start boarding is to try to determine if there was a post cutoff payment that went to the prior servicer that went to someone else. It usually works itself out okay. Most sellers are pretty honest and they'll forward that money. Occasionally it doesn't happen, but Allied doesn't have a lot of power in that case.
So let me ask you two quick questions because we get these questions often is, can Allied hold collateral files, and what's your typical fees per month? Right, that's the most common question we get is, how much do you guys charge per month? And if I have a file that's coming, I'm a brand new buyer, and I have a file coming to me, I don't have a lockbox or a safe. Can I send them to you? Will you hold the collateral?
And one more on that is, I'm a new investor. Will you just do one loan? I just bought my first loan. Will you take care of one loan, or do I need to send you 10?
Yes, we will do one loan. We have the bulk of our clients are single loan people, or probably, especially if you start looking at less than 5 or 10, then that number just gets exponentially bigger. We have no problem if this is your first loan, it's your only loan. We have no problem if it's your only loan with Allied. Let's say you're using someone else for your North Carolina deals, because we don't do North Carolina. So maybe, maybe you're somewhere else with that, but you got a Texas and you want to bring it to Allied. Great. One loan's not a problem. We charge, our setup fee is $100 for first liens, and it's $50 for juniors. It's $18.50 a month for servicing on performing loans. It's $15 per month on non-performing. We do share any accrued and paid late charges 50-50. And the only other fee that's actually listed in our servicing agreement is if you choose to change servicers at any point, there is a $50 deboarding fee. So that's really it. Our fee structure is pretty straightforward. It that buys you Allied. If we have to go outside of our office for a vendor, so a door knock, an inspection, foreclosure action, bankruptcy attorney, any of that, then we're going to give you upfront notice via email. You approve the fee, and at that point it'd be incurred, and then that's billed back to you straight across. So the monthly fee gets you Allied, and then any other fees are only if we have to go outside for a vendor. As far as collateral documents go, I wish I held everyone's collateral documents. Everyone's, because it makes my life so much easier. I have had events where we were talking before the video where I got a collateral file at payment in full and none of the assignments have been recorded. Okay, well, now I got to do all that before I can, even do the release. And I get files where the note's gone, or I get files where they're not originals in the end. If I get your collateral file at boarding, first of all, we're going to review it. We're going to make sure it's complete, and we're going to make sure that everything is assigned through to you. We are going to make sure that it gets to you. And we're also not going to record your transfer documents if something's already broken. We're not going to make it more broken. We image all of our collateral files. They are held in fireproof storage. There is no additional charge for document custody.
Wow.
It also makes it easier in states where we have to surrender notes or other originals to the court or to the attorney to start the action. It speeds everything up. And the less that a file and its contents move through the mail or FedEx, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's like, oh, it's FedEx, it'll be no problem. I happen to know personally that there's a box of files that will never be recovered because it fell off a plane on a runway, burst open, and the papers went poof. You're never recreating those files. They're gone. And the note still has magic. I know there's a lot of movement towards e-sign and e-notarize, and that's great. But in some states, the note has magic and you need it. Everybody's, oh, lost note affidavit. That only works if you have a copy of the note to attach. If you have nothing, a lost note affidavit does you no good.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but I love holding the collateral files. I love being able to pull them and check things. You can't imagine how many times we get a question from an attorney. Yeah, we're missing an allonge. And we look in our images and we're like, well, we don't have it. Turns out it was on the back of the note, but we didn't have the original document. So we didn't make the image. So we didn't realize that was missing. And if you are an individual, if you don't have fireproof storage, or if you plan to travel, I had a client who said, well, I can't send you the original note because I'm in Canada for the next 60 days. Well, that doesn't work in real estate. I need it today.
Yeah.
So, and even if you do have storage, let's say you use a safety deposit box, that's pretty common. Okay, are you the only one who knows you have the box? Are you the only one who has a key who can open it? Because unfortunately, the reality is we cannot predict how our lives are going to go. And a deceased seller, deceased lender is a problem.
Yeah.
Because especially if we don't know who your heirs are.
Yeah.
We're good, but we can't just, get all of this.
Well
That's why
said.
we're always like, if you're an LLC and you're single member,
Yeah.
what happens if you're unavailable to sign?
Yeah.
At least give someone a POA, do something. Give Allied a POA. We have a standard form. If you want to make us your limited power of attorney for purposes of your
I've done that.
loan servicing, and do you like signing documents? Because I can tell you this, my clients who I have an LPOA on, when it comes time and that loan pays in full and I print the document, sign the document and send their wire and it's happening a week or less from payoff versus I have to produce the document, I have to send it to you, you have to sign it, you have to return it, I have to have an original, it has to be
wet
right.
signed. Yep.
Hey, you can get your money faster. So it's an option. And I don't know if all servicers have that option. I know that it's an option here. But it's definitely something to ask, especially single member or an individual holding notes. If there's no one else who can sign on your behalf, that's gonna save you some struggle going forward. And it allows you to lead the life you want to lead. Do you want to travel? Do you want to be out of the country? Do you, what do you want to do?
So Marco asked, I'm not sure if it was a statement or question, that is it $0 for escrow?
I do not upcharge for escrow. I do not charge for multiple disbursements. I do not upcharge for partials.
BK?
No. Our standard non-performing fee would apply. It depends on the nature of the BK. Is it going to be a performing Chapter 13 or whatnot? It kind of depends on what was in place before it happened, but we don't charge the upcharge. The only thing you get is the legal fees for the preparing and filing of the proof of claim, the review of the plan, and any required objections. And normally on the bulk of Chapter 13s, there's a big front loading of those types of costs. But then once the plan's confirmed, I mean, in my opinion, it's simply the posting of a payment. We do the maintenance on our end to create the pre and post buckets. And then it's just a matter of posting payments. So we've never had a philosophy here at Allied that it was special. Kind of like partials. They're not special. Our system does it. Once we do the maintenance to match up to the plan and the proof of claim, after that, it's just posting checks.
And with the non-performing world, are you guys doing the borrower outreach if we request it? Are you calling the borrower? And your fee, for most servicers, I'm sure you know this, your fees are astronomically lower than most servicers, which is great. If I need a borrower goes to default, will you do the phone calls, handle all the issues, and reach out to me for the problems at the same fee as you're charging for the monthly chart for the low dollars?
Yeah, we absolutely. It's our collector has a standard list that's popping up. We are not calling them on day 4. I tell you right now.
Yes.
We never call before the expiration of the grace period. We rarely call before we're getting closer to that 30 or 45 day mark, only because these are not borrowers who pay on time. The ones who pay on time, they're on ACH.
Yeah.
I'm going to be totally honest. If they're on ACH, they're going to pay on time. The borrowers are unsophisticated. They use every day of their grace period, every second of it. And in many times, I have clients who pay their late charge every month.
Yeah.
Borrowers pay their late charge every single month. Great.
Love that.
That's
Love
great.
it.
And if we call them and if they're like, oh, I was just going to mail you a payment, we could be like, we take that payment right over the phone. We'll do it right now. So we do payments over the phone. They can go onto our website and make payments if they don't like to talk to us. A lot of borrowers, they don't want to talk to you. They'll just go online, especially if you call, they don't answer, and then they go online and they make that payment and you see it, that it's going to post the next day. It works kind of cool. Our website, the portal for the borrowers, they can actually opt in for a reminder. It'll text them about 4 days prior. Hey, your payment's almost due. And that actually works for some of our borrowers who are not, if someone doesn't ask them to pay, they don't pay.
Yeah.
But so because we are a small company, we're not calling them every 3 days. That's not happening. We also review the loan a little bit. We know these borrowers. We know if this borrower is going to pay on the last day of the month, we're not going to call them. We know they're going to pay on the last day of the month.
Sure.
Some of our borrowers only pay if they get a notice of demand. We call that the quarterly payment plan, where every 3 months we send a demand and they reinstate, and then they immediately redefault and pay 3 months later. They like paying fees. I mean, they have to pay for that notice of demand, and clearly, that works for them. But collections is it is less a science, more an art. It is not more calls, more letters gets more response. It really has to do with knowing what that borrower is going to do or not do.
Yeah.
But we also try to make it really easy for them to pay. Like I said, they can be on ACH. We'll pull their payment every month. We'll pull their payment every 2 weeks. How do they? We try to fit it to their paydays. We're not like you have to pay on your due date the whole amount. If they're paid every 2 weeks or twice a month, we can split it up. We can help them out with that. Of course, they can always call in a payment. They can do the web payment. They can use their bank's bill pay with borrowers who wire every month.
Wow.
Again, clearly, people have more money than I do to pay bank fees because they are out there making use of that. But it's a guarantee. At least it's not a payment that can go NSF. So there's some plus to that. So, and of course, we still have borrowers who mail in a check every month. Just mail it in. They write it out and they mail it in.
Actually, I think we do. We have it done. My wife does it. She just likes doing it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got everything on auto pay. That's like my preference, but some people don't trust it. We have people who will do a payment over the phone, but they won't do it via our website because they don't trust that. I'm like, so you'd give a person your banking information on the website. Not doing that. Yeah. So borrowers are funny. But yes, all of our outreach, like I said, the use of any allied employee is included in that fee. So our collectors doing the collections, our 45-day notices are run regularly. That's a surprisingly effective letter. They only read as far as the sentence that says the lender may start foreclosure, and then they call because they're in foreclosure, and no, you're not. Right. But it's an effective letter. One of the few the federal government has ever come up with that has any kind of desired result. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if we understand this question from Mo. I'm going to do my best to kind of translate it. That there was about, I guess, third-party vendors and their compliance with FDCPA. Well, I'm positive if I'm messing the question up. Nathan, do you understand the question? It's in the chat. I just wanted to see.
I saw it as well. I'm not familiar with this. Let me just read it the way it's written here, and we'll see. It says, after reading about the Hunstein versus Preferred Collection and Management Services case, what measures does Allied take when it comes to third-party vendors and compliance with FDCPA?
So we don't have any third-party collection vendors.
Okay.
Other than our foreclosure attorneys, and foreclosure attorneys are actually handled differently under FDCPA, and we're using established firms that specialize in foreclosure and bankruptcy, and so we can rely on on their policies and procedures for any required notices that they send out. I'm not familiar with this particular case, so I'm not sure. But it appears that
The
someone
only
was
I'm thinking about is maybe if someone's doing a door knock, maybe that's where it was going.
So door knocks actually are a pretty good example. We use a door knock firm. When we first signed up with them, they basically have a vetted letter that they will deliver. So there's no custom letters with door knocks. I get that question a lot. Can I send a special? No, you can't. We have a special letter. It's specifically written to comply with FDCPA, and they continually update that letter to ensure that any new compliance requirements are included. And based on the information that we put into their web portal, that's how the letter maintains its compliant situation. I have to tell truthfully how much is owed, what the outstanding balance is, what the next due date is. And so if there was a claim that it was false information, that would come back on Allied because I provided it. But the text of the letter itself is, we're trying to reach you because, you're delinquent or whatnot. I'd have to look. It's been a long time since I've looked at the letter. We've had the same vendor for years. We have never had an incident relating to door knock letters. So that at least has been great. But most other vendors don't really fall under that. They aren't doing collection. Now, if you're trying to send a realtor by and ask them what you're trying to do, like your own door knock, I don't know that that's the best idea. Realtors are definitely not FDCPA experts. If you're just going there to find out who lives there, okay, you're probably okay. And if they're going to hand them a pre-approved letter, maybe from your attorney, okay, maybe that works.
I usually, if I do a door knock, I typically say, listen, just knock on the door, get someone to answer the door and say, listen, I would like you to call, the lender would like you to call the servicer and get them on the phone. And just getting them in that contact where the servicer now can speak to the borrower and get the ball rolling. It's just break through that door. Because sometimes you have the wrong phone number, maybe the phone number changed, maybe the people there just are kind of going, whatever. Maybe it's a tenant that moved in the house. Who knows what the situation is? And they're saying, when I answer call.
You get the tenant situation, you have to be careful again because you can't tell the tenant that they're delinquent.
Correct.
This is where this whole FDCPA and privacy laws take place. If the wife is not on the note and she answers the door, you cannot tell her the loan is delinquent. You literally can't. You can only speak to the borrower, and the borrower are only the parties that sign the note. There are no others. It doesn't matter if the wife's on the deed of trust. It doesn't matter if the brother's on the mortgage. You cannot disclose that because they are non-obligated on the note. The note is your key. No modification can add. I've seen modifications where they have the husband and the wife sign, even though one of them wasn't on the note. You can't create personal liability that wasn't there. Having them sign is, unless you're specifically indicating somehow that this is a non-obligated co-mortgagor, I guess you could do that. But when you're modifying the note, it should be signed by the people who signed the note. So you got to be careful.
So that also applies to phone calls too, though, right? If I call,
if you call and the wife answers, you have to ask for Mr. If she asks why you're calling, you can say, I'm calling regarding the property at XYZ. That's it. You can't say
with a debt.
You can't do anything. And that's, again, that's why you rely on your servicers or your attorneys to do these types of things, because you don't want to make that mistake. And you can't assume that the people listed that the prior servicer listed Mr. and Mrs. You cannot assume that they are both on the note. We have that all the time. They'll both be listed in the customer information, and then we pull the note copy, and by God, one of them isn't on there. So we have to pull them off as a contact for the file. Now, if Mr. gives us authorization, great, we'll put her on there. She will have a 4-digit code so we can positively identify her when she calls. And you can't take their word for it either. If you're like, hi, I'd like to speak to Mr. Smith, and this is he, and you say, Mr. Smith, this is blah, blah, blah. And you need to say, can you confirm the last 4 digits of your social security number for me? Or can you confirm your date of birth?
Just
because
something
I can't tell you how many times they lie. They lie when they call.
I lie. I've done that before.
He'll be like, oh, and you'll be like, what's the last 4 digits of Social Security? Long pause. Match, we're like, are you actually this person, or
Yeah.
are you the son or whatnot? And
Yeah.
happens a lot, the Spanish speaking community, because they'll very often have their children call for them.
Yeah.
And it's really educating them that you can call either with your parent, or your parent
Yes.
needs to confirm their identity and give permission to speak to you.
Yeah.
You can't pretend. I hear my collector saying that all the time. You cannot pretend
Yeah.
to be the borrower. That's fraud.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
So what are some of the things that investors new and experienced you've seen that really is something that should be a takeaway point of something they can improve in their business, something that you've seen that something either you're saying, boy, as an investor, I would do it differently, or something you've seen it was, wow, that was really well done. Can you name an experience you have that maybe falls in that category?
Well, on the negative side, I did have a client who bought several loans and then was surprised they were land contracts.
Ooh.
Do not buy loans that you haven't seen documents on. Don't do it.
Wow.
It's not smart. If you don't see the chain that shows, and especially when you're talking land contracts, you need from
Yeah.
the vesting deed to the original land contract creator, and you need everything.
Yeah.
You should not be surprised by your servicer saying, oh, I'm sorry, you're in Alabama, this is a land contract and it's going to take forever to foreclose because because there's rules. Or West Virginia, where they don't even recognize them. They don't even know what to do with them. I had to go through a contract breach lawsuit to foreclose out that land contract in West Virginia because they were like, we don't know what this is.
Yeah.
So do not buy loans that you do not see the collateral on. I mean, I see all of these due diligence talks. I know you guys talk about this. It seems so obvious to me, but there is surprise. There is surprise.
So something good. What was the event where you saw an investor that was really something savvy or a success? Or a technique that you liked?
I really like, I think probably, I know tapes are big these days. I think I see more quality due diligence when it comes to the one-offs or the small groups. And I know there's a time crunch. They don't give you a lot of time to determine your tape and determine I know this. I get it. But really, the smaller, more focused investors, I think investors who know their states, who know how to buy. Pricing is huge. Understanding that just because you paid a lot for a loan doesn't mean you're going to get paid a lot for the loan. It doesn't always work out that way. And I have some folks who struggle. They're like, well, I'm not going to do this proposed deal because I paid X. And I'm like, it's our experience that REOs are never the answer.
Yeah.
They really are the worst case scenario. We tell borrowers this all the time. Nobody actually wants your house.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want your $24,000 roof problem house. I want you to pay. That's what the lender wants. They want you to pay. But if you don't pay, you can't stay. I mean, we all know that's basically how it works.
Yeah.
There's no other option. There's no in between. So I would say clients who know their states, they know what the worst case expenses are, because that's what we're looking at here. You have to buy with worst case mentality. It's performing today, but it might not be tomorrow. Are you prepared? Let's say you're buying in New Jersey. Are you prepared for what's involved with a 500-day foreclosure action? Minimum.
Right.
Minimum. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared for those costs? And if you're going to stand on your mountain and die there, are you willing to pay the $14,000, $20,000, $30,000 in attorney fees to be right?
Yeah.
Right.
And property taxes, right?
And property taxes.
Yeah, we're 10 grand a year in property. We're 10 grand a year of property tax out here.
Nuts.
So I preach this all the time, and I agree with you that I always base my bid based on the worst case scenario. And I've had sellers say to me, but this thing's been performing for 12 months. And then my answer is, well, originally in 2008, What happened before the 12 months? It non-performed one period of time. There's a chance it could do it again. If it does not perform, and I predicted and I bid my based on yield alone, and it defaults, what will happen to my, well, you bought it as a yield. Well, great, but now it defaulted. What are you going to do about it? And most people say, well, I bought a performer. I bid as a performer. And that's the problem. A lot of people don't take into account the states, the timeframes, the cost, the court plus the legal cost, which are two different things. Everyone talk about Fannie Mae pricing. There's the cost of auction, of, you know, in doing the auction fees sometimes, also the publication of it, all those kind of things on top of the Fannie Mae fees, and the timeframes. Ohio, New Jersey, the 5 boroughs, Chicago, right? These are the areas where our timeline, we have a huge calculator, figures that stuff out, where Texas is different than New Jersey. Completely different.
Fly Texas all day long.
Yeah,
Unless
right.
the borrower dies intestate, and then you're hosed. That's the only bad thing in Texas. But we just don't know when a borrower is going to get divorced, when a borrower is going to die, when they lose their jobs.
Mm-hmm. And also when you're looking at purchasing, that worst case scenario might not be taken back to the house. It might be a reinstatement. It might be a payoff.
Yeah.
You know, and so again, worst case scenario being relative to that particular note. It's
or
not
sell at auction. It can be selling at auction. You bought it and you're predicting it could perform. And next, you know, you're foreclosing on it. And then you're like, great, I'll get the equity when I sell it. And someone comes in and buys
and
the
you're
note
outbid.
And then
you're outbid.
Toast.
Yeah.
So looking at what's the worst case scenario for that particular note in that particular situation.
And that's really the work that a client is supposed to be doing when I send them over a completed workout package. We will solicit that. We have a package and application. We ask for a bunch of backup information, then we will send it to the client. And I don't think all of our clients do this. I mean, the whole process, kind of a mystery. We send them the package and I'll make a recommendation. Sometimes I'll be like, look, here's what I think would probably work for these guys. But really, that's what you've got to be doing. You got to be doing that net present value analysis. You got to be thinking, okay, if I take the 10,000 they're offering as a discounted payoff, what's my yield versus if I have to worst case foreclose and add a bankruptcy? Always add a bankruptcy. Add a bankruptcy. You know, what about that? What about, you know, do I come back and offer a deed in lieu and then resell? How, you know, taking a look at all those scenarios. Deed in lieus are hard. I have so many clients who are like, okay, if they're delinquent, solicit them for a deed in lieu.
Yeah.
If it's not a land contract and they've been there for a while, a deed in lieu offends them because they're like, this is my home. I'm not giving you my home, you know. Land contracts are a little bit different. Those borrowers seem to think they're tenants and they kind of disappear sometimes, which could be the best case. Yeah. Could be the best case that they're gone and
understand for some people that deed in lieus can go wrong because if there's other liens on that property, you're deed in lieuing it, you're taking on the debt as well. That the
do not do them yourself.
Yeah.
Get a title report. Use an attorney. In some states there are required disclosures and things that must be recorded to actually make this okay. Yeah. I mean, granted, if it was a mortgage or deed of trust and you took a deed in lieu and then you find out there's a problem, if you haven't released the mortgage or deed of trust, you could just foreclose on yourself and clean title, but that's expensive. And it's hard after the fact. Let's find out beforehand. Title is so underrated. Yeah. And I think people get title and they don't know how to read it, or they just don't, or they don't get a guaranteed title product. Yeah. If you're doing something like a foreclosure, you get a trustee sale guarantee in many cases, or you get a foreclosure title search. There are guarantees, there are warranties that come with that. If you're going to do a deed in lieu, you're going to want a title commitment. And best practice is pay to convert the commitment to a owner's policy when you finish your deed in lieu, because then you can stand and say, from this date, I had clear title and this title company says so. And if I don't, they have to solve the problem. Awesome. That's one of the things that I don't see anymore that we used to see all the time at Met with note acquisitions, was getting either the lender's policy that the original seller got and having it endorsed over to you with the assignment, or with land contracts, Metropolitan bought a new owner's policy on every single one and they got themselves insured. The current state right now, where I'm seeing so many of these land contracts are unrecorded, which is its own fraught with peril sort of adventure, it would be more difficult to do so. But I mean, at least a really good title search, just so that you know where you're at, because there's a lot of errors, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of deed deficiencies that come up usually when the borrower wants to pay off. And that's a hard time to fix some of that, because these folks are gone.
Yeah,
You can't
sure.
you can't work your way back through. I mean, some things can be fixed, some things cannot.
Yeah.
So coming from the servicing side of things, what's from what you've seen and what you've experienced, and you've been around at least as an allied company since 2004, so you've seen a few market roller coasters.
Yeah.
What's your prediction? What do you see coming down the pipe? You mentioned 12 to 18 months, meaning?
Okay, so
Crystal ball time.
I mean, we've got a couple things going on here. We've got the skyrocketing values going again, and we all know it's great if you're selling your house right now. That's awesome. Yeah. But it's not awesome going forward if there are people tapping equity again, if we are a pre-2008 behavior where people are tapping equity. And I think combined with the pandemic and some of the job issues, there may have been some equity tapping to just to rescue them.
And low interest rates and ease of getting.
We have had, so pandemic wise, Allied has not seen a market increase in defaults related to COVID. We did not, we expected it and we did not have it. One of the things we also did was we made them prove the hardship before they could have a forbearance, which of course they didn't do that in your big servicers. You literally could go on their website, say, I've been affected by COVID, and they gave you a 6-month deferral. Okay, that didn't happen here. We told people that wasn't an option, but we've had record payoffs. These low interest rates are record payoffs, and not all of them are refinances. There's a lot of sales. People are taking advantage of the high, the high values as well. But I think we're looking at a problem when the COVID deferrals come due. Yeah. There are no borrowers, in my opinion, who can afford to come up with 12 months of payments today for what they've deferred and what they've added to their deferral. I think that's more an issue for your standard Fannie, Freddie, VA, FHA, your guaranteed loans. I think there's going to be a huge glut of modifications, which is great. But I also think you've got borrowers who have been permanently placed in a hardship where they will not be able to. So I think we will start seeing some sales coming out of the big servicers of loans where the borrower has permanently lost their job or lost a spouse to COVID or some other issue, and they literally cannot afford to pay their mortgage. Those are the worst kinds. They're the most heartbreaking because they just, they literally can't afford to pay. And if a borrower has no ability to repay, you can't offer them a modification.
Correct.
You can work with them for potential deed in lieu. You can work with them for a sale. You can try, but you can't work it out because they don't have the income, and that's a big key to your underwriting process.
Right.
But I think there's going to be another wave of non-performing coming onto the market. I think it'll be interesting. I don't know if it'll be quite as extensive as what we saw in 2008. And all I can hope is that happens before the values start tanking, because then at least they have more options, and we have more options as holders to help.
And we're wondering if it's going to be more commercial or residential, right? Because the thought is going to be more commercial than residential at this point.
My thing with the commercial, and we do so little, it's very peripheral to our business, but my thing with commercial is just from what you see in Spokane, even in my area, is that work from home has damaged the office space, because a lot of companies just realized, why do I pay so much for office space when clearly we can work from home? And I think a lot of companies are going to take advantage of getting rid of that overhead costs for space and utilities and whatnot, and maintain, at least to a certain extent, some work from home.
Yeah.
And I think that's been hard on the office space. And of course, commercials, retail space has suffered as well. Restaurant space has suffered as well. And the restaurants here, they're struggling to recover because they can't get any employees.
Yeah.
I can't open up because I don't have wait staff or I don't have kitchen staff.
Or they're new and you get a new waiter and waitress and it's just the people come and they're like, I'm not going back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah.
So
It's gonna be very
it's going to be interesting.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but definitely commercial, you're going to have to see some repurposing. I think it's some creative repurposing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazon, help me out. Right?
Yeah, or I'll tell you this, our local mall, right?
Yeah.
Definitely struggling. You can't run the theaters. The stores had to be careful. They opened up that empty space in like hallways and brought in like an indoor farmers market because that got them some income for booth rental, and it got people in the mall, which got them into the other parts of the mall. So I was like, wow, that's kind of creative. And it was early too, because our weather in the early spring is not nice. But if you still want to go and look at arts and crafts and soap and honey and whatever, that was an option, and it definitely brought people in, and it got people out because we're all experiencing that pandemic fatigue. We just want to go out. I used to lament to my son, I just want to have brunch again. I want to have brunch.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap it up there and turn off the Facebook Live feed, guys. I appreciate everyone jumping on here. Melissa, thank you for coming on this so early in the morning on a Friday day. I know we're dealing with some nice weather coming up. Hopefully you are as well. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Melissa. She's been real helpful. The cost for servicing is astronomically cheap compared to a lot of places. And as she said before, and I'll vouch for it, a lot of people recommend it because the services are top notch and you're not arm or leg it. And you're actually not getting, dinged for every little thing you're doing too, which is a really nice change. So reach out to Melissa and Allied Servicing for any questions. I do have the servicing fees on the comparison chart if you need them. But if you have any particular questions for Melissa, reach out to Melissa and go from there. So enjoy, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. And Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.